Yeah, this is the beginner painting workshop. You have to sign up, but I think we're full up.
As I said, I was just looking.
No worries.
More curiosity to watch than.
Yeah, no worries. You're welcome to stay and watch. All right. Did whoever I gave, did everybody have their napkin now? Here's. All right. You guys over at that table, can one of you come over and grab these paints, please? And
Closest anyway. All these?
just grab the whole bunch, yeah. You guys over here, I'm going to give you all. Did I give you a look on them and see if any of them say solid black?
Yeah, one of them.
You got one solid black? Okay, good. So these are called bones. Have you ever painted anybody here before? You have, okay. So these are called bones, and they're made from a company called Reaper. And the thing with them is that you don't have to prime them, which means you don't have to put on a base coat of paint to paint color over it. They take paint right out of the box, and they're designed that way. They have some flaws. They're not great detail because it's a rubbery material, but if you paint them right and put a base underneath them when you're done and take your time with them, they look pretty good. So what we're going to do is, first thing we're going to do, now you guys over here, I use the straight pin to poke holes in the top because they may have dried up, so I'm going to try and do that real quick for you guys here. Your palettes, take the black or a dark brown and put a couple of drops of paint in one of the dimples. Just grab one. You can also use dark green or even whatever it's better to use a dark brown or a black because you're going to put a base kind of like undercoat that creates shadow. So looking at my arm, my skin here is lighter than inside the crease because the light doesn't hit the crease. So the idea with this first step is to create a dark shadow. So brown, gray, or black, and put a couple of drops in the palette, your palette, and then pass it around. And if you would please pass it to the other table because until I get started here. So everybody do that. I'm going to try and get you a black right away so you guys can start too. Okay, good. So who's a good catcher? Here we go. Catch. All right, so just put a couple of drops in one of the dimples and pass it around the table, and I'm going to get you other colors. Do you guys have white? All right, good. So both have black and white. Red, blue, orange, yellow, purple, green. Any silver or gold? Let's see. I'm not sure if this is silver or gold. I think these are silver, but I'm not positive. I think they are. Yeah. You on the forward table, do you guys have silver? It's kind of a very light gray paint. If you don't, could you pass that to them, please? And I'll give you guys one too. So did everyone in all the tables? After you get your paint, a couple of drops, go ahead and paint your miniatures with that. You can paint the entire thing, but what you want to really focus in on is getting it in the recesses. Okay, so go ahead and do that first step. And I'm still working on getting these. Actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give these to you guys, and then if any of them don't come out, then you can ask me to poke the needle in it. Color without first dipping it in a cup of water, swish it around, and dragging the paint off. So I'm going to try and catch up to you guys. use a different brush because I'm going to do it quicker. So I'm going to use something a little bit bigger. This first step, it's okay to use, dilute your brush slightly so you have a little bit of water with the paint. Could you all look at up the top what I'm doing? I diluted it a little bit. It doesn't cover everything well, but it's getting in the cracks. And I'm doing it very fast. I'm splashing it on the whole thing. All right, not too.
It wasn't folded, just they ran out of fold.
I don't care. Thank you so much. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting it, I don't want it too diluted because then it won't stick, but I want to get it on and it'll take forever to dry. I do want to get it into the crevices and cracks, so I'm doing this shadow coat, you might call it. Now if I'm doing a miniature that's not a bones miniature, that's not one that you can just paint right away, a plastic or a metal miniature, what I'll do is after I've washed the miniature carefully, these you don't have to wash because they say you don't have to, that's right out of the thing. I'll wash the miniature, I'll put it together if I have to, and then what I'll do is I will spray it with a black or gray or white enamel base coat so that I have my miniature completely covered in black, or whatever color it is that I'm using as the bottom. And it's enamel spray. So you can literally go to the store and get primer that's used for plastic models. And you spray it on and the whole miniature, I do 20 or 30 miniatures at one shot so I don't waste the paint, right? You put it on a tray, you take it outside, you spray from one direction, you swivel it, spray from all the different four directions. Then I'll knock them over and I'll spray the areas that were coming from the bottom that the spray can didn't hit from my angles. I'll make sure they're covered in black. After I've covered them in black paint, I'll have something that looks like this. Actually, yeah, this is good. So if you look on the screen, here's a miniature that was gray. Here's the bottom. You can see that it's gray. And now I painted it with the black primer. It's all black. So when I do a miniature like this, I want to have the black over the whole thing because I'm going to slowly build up color on top of that. Now, I'm waiting for my miniature, this bones one, to dry before I put any color on it. So it's going to take a while. So while it's drying, if you finish painting yours, just put it down and let it sit for a while and let it dry while I show you what I do next. This particular miniature, let's see if I have a different one. I don't know if I want to paint that one right away. Yeah, I can do that one. So this particular miniature is some sort of an automatron or something. It's like a steel or a metal golem or whatever they're called, a created metal, a man of some sort. So you can't really, even up close with the light, you can't really see all the little detail. Even if I hold it really close, the black, it just blends in and it's very difficult to see exactly what it looks like, all the detail. So what I'm going to try and do is use a lighter color, and I'm going to do what's called dry brushing the entire thing. And when I finish the dry brush coat, it's going to make all the other parts pop. So I'm going to use a lighter color like a flesh color or a tan. And I'm going to just go right from here. Now, true dry brushing means once you put the paint on, the whole bristles, you then drag it across a paper towel or something to get almost no paint on the brush so that when you scuff it back and forth, it doesn't leave a big coat. Okay, everybody stop for a second and watch the screen, what I'm gonna do. I'm going to scuff this, and notice how it's going on, but it's not going in all the recesses. I don't want it to. This is almost too much right there. I want it to just hit the highlighted areas. And I'm just going back and forth scuffing it. And because it's a light color on the black, it will actually change color as it dries because the black kind of comes through it. And you start to see all the detail. You also start to see any defects, like places where there's flash lines. That's where the mold that they cast it in, it comes through. So if you look, let's see if I can catch one with the camera. Okay, is that one? No? That's a pretty good mini. I don't see any flash lines right away.
What color do you suggest for this?
For what I'm doing now?
Yeah.
I usually use a tan or a flesh or something like that. Very rarely I'll use a white, but usually it's a tan or a flesh, because a light gray or a tan, what happens is it's a very, very good color to lighten up something without committing, because once you put on the black, this tan turns to light gray, but all the dark areas are still black. And just look at the detail now that you can see. If you look up there, everything just sort of changes. I want to try and turn it so that you guys can see it. I don't know how this, it's like everything's backwards in this thing. Okay, so if you look carefully at it, there we go, you can see how it pops, all the little detail. There's rivets on this arm, and they just stand out from the background because I hit them with the lighter paint. And on the back now you can see all the little gears and gadgets that this guy has. So what you're doing with your Bones miniatures, you're putting it, and when it dries, the ink, the wash dries, it's going to be kind of a gray look. And it's going to have sort of this effect. Now, I put mine with too much water, so there's white splotches on it. But with yours, it should be darker, so it's almost like a black. So you're going to right to this step where you had the black one. You're taking the white miniature or the gray miniature you had, and pretty much making it black or dark brown. And after it dries, you're going to take some of that tan color. And you're going to do the dry brush. You're going to actually put 1 drop or 2 drops, get the paint on the brush, and then drag it away. By the way, I want you to just take a real quick look when I clean my brush. I'm going to put it in the cup, I'm going to swirl it around and push it to the bottom so that it actually crushes the brushes a little bit, and then tap it off, and then I'm going to drag it and twist it so that the bristles become straight again and in a natural direction. So I keep my brushes nice. I never stand them up with the bristles down. I either put them up this way, or most of the time I just lay them flat. That way they'll last a lot longer. So while hopefully this will dry for a while. I use so much water, I'll blow on it. But I'm going to go to the next step with this one that was already black that I put the light on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start. Huh?
You have that pin, I think this one's.
Yep, right here. Yeah, that should be good now. You're welcome. So, this automatron is metal, a metal man. I'm thinking, what will make my metal miniature look realistic? You have to say the same thing to yourself. What do you know about your character, the piece you're painting? What weapons, if any, is he or she holding? What kind of clothing? What kind of instruments? Think about, in the real world, what those objects look like. And the trick to a good painted miniature is you're painting from the inside out, which means you're going from dark to light. You guys who came in last, I forgot to give you my steps that you could take with you. Please, each. each of you, please pass one of those over, whoever came in last. I think she didn't get one. Here's one for you. So these are basically the steps that I'm teaching you today. So on your miniature, if you have the female magic user, the elf, this is an opportunity to do some really amazing color on her robe. If she has, like, I haven't analyzed it much, but it looks like she might have like a vest hanging over the robe on the top. Her legs look like they're exposed. The one on the, if you're looking at her, the one on the right, it's like a bare leg, and then she's wearing boots. So you can think about what color skin tone, what color hair. These are all things that you want to consider before you paint. It looks like her vest in the middle has a little bit of cleavage showing, so you can think about that. Her hands obviously are sticking out. So if I'm going to do a dark Caucasian, a light Caucasian, a tan, or whatever it is, I'm going to use the darkest color that looks like it's the skin tone that I want to end up with. And after I do that dark color, I'm going to go ahead and lighten it up with a little bit of white or yellow or orange, and slowly put slightly lighter colors so that it's going from dark to light as I get closer to the surface where the light would hit it. So, for example, going back to my metal mini, I am going to decide I'm going to do him in an iron, but iron rusts. So I want to rust him out. So what color is rust? It's from oranges to reds to browns. So I'm going to do a little bit of brown on him. I'm going to take some brown. What color is this? Woodland brown. That might work with a little bit of black. I don't want it to be too light. I'm going to add just a touch of that. So now I have a kind of a dirty brownish black. I'm going to go ahead and, again, with the dry brush, I'm just put a little bit on it. And I'm going to paint him mostly on his body this metallic, or well, this rusty looking brown, because that's the darkest of the color that he's going to be. I'm not going to paint the whole thing hard. I'm going to just drag it over and let it fall where it does. I don't want to put a lot, because I want that black that I put on originally to show through in the shadowy parts. And as I do him, I'm scuffing him, putting a little at a time. It can be a little bit wet, but I'm not getting it into the creases. I don't want to have a lot of paint on my brush. One of the most important things about painting is to not load up your brush with a lot of paint. Do a little at a time so that you can easily add more to change the color. And you don't get rid of any detail, because a lot of people, when they start painting, they say, "Oh, I want it to look beautiful. I put all this beautiful paint on it," but then you lose the detail. You put too much thick paint. It's better to do 100 strokes a little at a time than to do 3 strokes. All right, it takes longer, but that's why most people who get into painting seriously are older. They don't, because when you're a kid, you don't have the patience. You don't want to do it. You want to get it over with and play with it. So when I started painting when I was 10 years old, by the way, I'm 61. I know I only look 30, but why are you laughing? When I started painting at 10, I was like that. I was like, "Oh, I want this to be ready," and I would spray it, or I would do whatever I do, and I painted it. It would look like garbage, but I would play with it, And as time went on, I started looking and watching other people paint. So now I've got a kind of a dull brownish gray. It's changed the color, and it's starting to look weathered, and that's fine, because I want it to have a different look. Now what I'm going to do, make sure before I change color, I'm going to find some orange or brown. Actually, I think I gave away all the paint. Throw me an orange, somebody. Is that orange? Yeah. Thank you. Could have drop or two, and right where the brown was, I don't care. And I'm going to put a little more over here. And does anybody have any yellow back there? And red? I'll switch. Here, throw me a red. 1, 2, 3. Nice. And throw me a yellow. Nice and hard. Oh, good. Thank you. All right. And I'm going to put a little red. Notice how I'm just putting a little drop. I'm going to use the mixability of these paints. This is good liquid paint. I'm going to toss these back to you. 1 and 2. Sorry. Oh, bad. Oh, my bad. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and take the one that I put with the brown. I put it in there on purpose because I'm going to mix it to make it. I'm going to use that dirtiness. I'm going to, as a matter of fact, if you could see the color, I don't know how well you can see it, it already looks like it's rust. And I'm going to put it right on top. It's a little bit wet, but I'll put more layers. And I don't want to hit the rivets. I want to leave those a little light. The places that are lighter, that stand out, I want to do that. And I just hit it in certain places. You know, rust is almost never uniform. In one piece of iron will have, if it's rusty, will have gradient features that change from one color to another. I'm going to hit the pure orange now, and I'm just going to wipe off most of it and just touch it a little bit. And it immediately starts to take on that the rusty look. The orange really goes a long way. And I'll just leave a little glob there. It came a little thick. That's okay because I like that bright little spot. And that's another thing. When you're painting, sometimes it's like that guy who does the happy little mistakes. Yeah, you know what I mean? So this is so you never are wrong unless you're putting too much paint. But you do something and sometimes you're about to paint some more and you're like, whoa, that actually looks really good. I'm going to leave it there. Another really cool feature about doing rust and this type of thing, this is actually going to be in my advanced class, one of those techniques. You can put a little bit more water and let it seep down and puddle in places because when it dries, it'll really be a rich color of that one just in one spot, and then then you can add the other things later. And I'm going to jump over to the red. I'm going to put a little bit of the red into the spot where I was before and just make it a little red. And I'm just going to blotch it onto different places. Again, I can always add or change because I'm not using a lot of paint. And the red, not so much, but it adds, if it mixes with the orange nicely, it will look more realistic. So I'm going ahead and do those spots. Now your pieces should be just about dry enough to start putting color. And what I would like you to do is, like I said before, you want to decide, you want to use your darkest color that you want to do. So let's say you have that female mage, right? What color do you want her cloak? Well, I think I want it to be green, a light green. Okay, don't put light green, but dark green. Very gently. So here is, and since I keep throwing my paint away, I don't know what I've got here. I think what's this over here? And no, I got more dark. What is this? Is it green? Oh, do I have a green here? Yeah. Oh, I have a mossy green. Okay, so I'm going to use mossy green on my female mage, or whatever she is. And don't lose my pin. I'm going to hit a little bit there. And I'm going to leave it pure green dark. But watch what I do with it. I'm going to take I'm going to use the bigger brush, even though it's easier to use a small brush like I gave you guys. I'm going to use my big brush, and I'm going to drag it gently over it. And it doesn't matter if I get it in the creases, as long as I go slowly enough. I don't want it to be a lot of paint, but I do want it to cover the area that I'm painting. Actually, I'm not sure how this girl is. Oh, she has a vest, I forgot. So it looks like she has some sort of a skirt that goes into long sleeve, like a long sleeve dress with a vest over it. I'm not really into women's fashion, but although my 2 daughters and my wife, I've seen them dress up enough. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and cover this with the green, and I don't want to be blotches. And my bad for not covering her whole thing with all the solid black, because now I'm having blotches, and you guys hopefully don't have those little white blotches. But I'll just do it, and I'll correct it as I go. So I'm go ahead and I'm painting all of her cloak or dress, whatever this thing is, the sleeves and everything, and I'm doing it pretty dark. And when it dries, I'm going to add, I can do two things. I can either add a little white to the green, but it'll look a little more chalky, but that might be what you want. Or you could actually add a little yellow to the green, and instead of it just getting white, chalky, lighter green, it gets a lighter green, but a much more smooth, colorful color change. So you can add black and white to make things lighter and darker. Or you can find a color that's on the color wheel that's a little lighter or a little darker. A perfect example is using green. If you want it a little darker, add a little blue instead of black. If you want it a little lighter, add a little yellow instead of white.
For the robe, are you doing it dry brush or wet?
No, a little more wet than dry, because I'm going to do the dry brush later. Right now, I want to cover the whole thing, so I'm going to do a little bit more wet. And now, what are some of those other critters you guys have? I know that some of you have the mage, but what else do you guys got? The dragon. Now, what's cool about the dragon, let's see if I have one here, is when you do the wings and stuff, these dragons, they have these little dimples on the backs of the wings. That's perfect for dry brushing. You also want the ribs where the arm, the finger bones go, that are coming through the, if you look on mine in the screen here, you see this line that comes here and this line here that comes up to the little claw. So those lines there, they're a darker color except the highlights of them, but near them, along the gaps, is a darker color than the center of the wing, because the membrane, as it stretches, more light gets through it. So you want to have it darker right near those ribs, if you will, those finger lines, and then lighter as you get closer to the middle of the skin, middle of the wing. So darker right along the edge, and then lighter in the skin on the middle, between the furthest center part away from the between the fingers, you know what I mean? Yeah, like the webbing. So like the part that's in between the furthest from the sections, it's stretched skin, right? Yeah. So it's going to be, light will shine through it. So you want that to be a little lighter than the dark. So if you're doing a red dragon, you want to have everything dark, and then you want to have it a little bit lighter, coming into like almost an orange or a pale red, coming to the middle of the skin, or the part we were just talking about. And then also, because those high ridges will catch light, you also want them to be a little bit lighter than right next to them. So you're going to have the little bit lighter on the finger parts, then right next to them a little darker, and then fading light again in the middle. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So in fact, since I'm talking about the dragon with you, I'm going to actually do the red, and I'm going to do some of this. I'm going to put on a bright red right on him. I'm not doing the black, because bones, you can do color right away. And we could have done this. We could have started painting right away, but I want you to get to the habit of putting a dark coat first to create shadow. But watch what I do here. I'm going to paint these wings, the red. And because it's pure pigment, pure paint, it's going to dry a little faster than by adding the water and stuff. So the light gray underneath makes them almost look pink, which is fine, because I'm going to then add a little bit of brown to my red, maybe a touch of black, and there we go. And I'm going to add this so that I get a little bit darker red look, and I'm going to just do right along the edge of here, so that the dark gets right next to the ribs of the fingers, whatever they're called. And this technique, by the way, what I'm doing is I'm darkening the deepest recesses and lightening the highest ones. I'm going to add a little more dark in here. So look how I don't know if you guys can see it on the screen, but I'm going right along. I don't want to darken the bone along here. I want to do it right next to it. Does that make sense? Does it come out? Is it coming out?
Yeah.
So now I have, but just by doing that, it makes these finger-like bones jump out. They stand out more. And I'm just going to do that right along. And I'm also doing it while the red is a little wet still, because what's happening is it'll blend nicely with the black that I'm adding. Oh, that just wiped it away, but that's interesting. So I'm trying to make a nice transition. I want it to be dark, light, and then dark, light again in the middle. This is basically what I'm looking to do here. So I'm creating this shadowy area where the recesses are again. And no matter what mini you're painting, you want to create shadow in the darkest, deepest places. You want it to be darker. Look where the wings join down here by his body. I'm putting black gray down there. I can always add a little bit of red later, but I want there to be a darker recessed area where it's the shadow is created down there. Now after he dries, because I use slightly wet paint, those little bumps on his wings are standing out already. I'm going to go back later. I'm going to hit him with a slightly lighter orangey red or a whitish red, and it's going to create higher areas that are easy to see. And the same thing with his front. I'm going to do, since I have some paint on here, I might as well darken it down on his neck and his mouth. Let him dry. So I'll let this guy dry for a while. My female elf, she's all dry. She's got this nasty looking green. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to hit it with some yellowy green, just lightly on the ridges, so that I start to get a lighter color on the most high, if that makes sense, the highest points, leaving the recesses darker. And you always want to remember the parts that are closest to the sky are brighter, because that's where the sun is going to be reflecting on. If that makes sense. So in order to be a good miniature painter, you have to remember two main things. Make your colors make sense from dark to light, from the deepest recess to the highest points. Every single time, just stay with that, whatever color you use. If you're going to do a light-skinned Caucasian, like most of us in the room are, you're going to start with a brown, actually, and then you're going to build up slowly, maybe add a little orange, and then a little bit of yellow, and then finally make your own flesh that you want. Flesh is made with yellow, red, and white, varying degrees of how much you put in, and you can make it darker or lighter. And if you want darker, you add more brown. You add brown to the mix, but it's usually just yellow, white, and red. If you're having a dark skin, you have brown. So my mage's cloak is modeled with green and white, but it's because I'm doing it fast. I didn't let it dry. I'll let her dry some more. I'll go back to my automatron, and I don't know if you can see, but it's getting kind of a patina, like almost a slightly rusted browny orange. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can add another dimension to this. A little more brownish red. Okay, it's time to go back to my dragon. I'm going to take the reddish brown, I'm going to add a little yellow to it, and I'm going to have kind of a lighter yellowy brown. I don't know if this is light enough or not. It should be okay. I'm going to start dragging it across different places of his wings, just so it changes slightly. And it's mostly dry brushing now. For those of you who are still figuring out dry brushing, you make sure your paintbrush is saturated with paint, and then you wipe most of it off onto your palette, and then when you got most of it off that's going to come off the brush on the palette, you then scuff it on paper towel or something, or a cloth, to get it almost no paint at all on it. If you're a gamer, you play Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, whatever, and you want your miniature to be more unique, don't shy away from changing your miniature. Let's say you pick up a Bones miniature like one of these, and it's got this ray gun in his hand. It's the modern one, and you're thinking to yourself, wouldn't it be cool to have that gun sitting in the mage's hand, hanging down? Well, sacrifice it, cut it off, and glue it onto the mage's hand. Don't worry, as long as you don't mind doing that, you can create things and change things. You find out if you can pick up some cheap miniatures at a store. Maybe they have a bargain bin, and you just pick them up for changing things. Maybe there's a facial expression that looks awesome on one mini that you found, and you really want that head or that face on someone else. Cut it off and put it on. Use super glue. You might want to, if it's a hard plastic or metal, you want to pin it, which means you're going to drill a little hole, and you literally put a piece of a pin or something in it, and then you glue them together, and it stays. So you customize the miniature. You are making it any way you want.
Have you done 3D printed minis at all?
Yeah, and I do it for people. The ones that they sell online, I don't like some of the things because a lot of them have texture, and it's hard to paint them. But people send them to me, and I paint them anyway. But yeah. I do a lot of commission work. I paint probably 1,000 miniatures a year, so I get everything from model kits to an army of Warhammer, War Machine. I have people that come to me and say, "Oh, I have 400 minis. Can you paint them?" Yeah, it's going to take a year or so. I'm a teacher, so I do this on my spare time. Summer is obviously the best time to do it, but my daughter, one of my 2 daughters, is going to have our first grandson, our first grandchild, October 5th. So I'm going to be a granddad, and so this summer has been different. Today was the baby shower, and fortunately I wasn't there because I'm not into baby showers. But I missed hanging out with them, but I got to see her last night and her husband, and they're really great. They live in Pennsylvania. But it was nice to see them, but usually summer is my busiest time, especially getting ready for this convention. And there's an Octocon coming up, I think, in Bethpage in October. If you guys are interested, I think I'm going to be doing paint shops there as well. And it's a little mini gaming convention. So the sheet, if you would while you're painting, I'm going to read the steps. Colin's basic steps to a good-looking miniature paint job. 1. Examine your miniature, look for the details so you know what they are. 2. Remove flash lines. A hobby knife works best. That's those little lines that are created, or extra plastic that doesn't belong there, and sometimes you'll see it go through part of the body or something, and you're like, why is that there? It doesn't make sense. Wash your miniature. Warm soapy water, rinse and dry with a lint-free cloth. You don't have to for the bones. They're ready to go right away. But if it's any other miniature, you want to wash them, because the release agent that they use to get them out of the molds is actually an oily residue to release it. And so, believe it or not, your hands have oils that will hurt the paint as well as that. So you wash it. Then after you do that, you want to spray the whole miniature with primer. For the method that I'm using, I use flat black. So at the bottom it says some miniatures come either pre-primed or in a material that needs no primer. The bones needs no primer. If you ever saw the new set that came out with Whiz Kids, Nolzers, Marvelous Minis, those packaged miniatures, they are pre-primed, but they usually have flash lines, so you just have to watch it out. Then after you spray paint it and let it dry, then you do dry brush entire miniature with a lighter color like tan. That's what we did. And then you'll notice any flash lines that you missed, remove them and recheck for the details. Decide on the base color, including flesh tones. Check the paint's flow and consistency. Test it before it goes on. You don't want to use a lot of paint. Number 9, do not use a lot of paint on your brush. You always can add more, or you can always add more. 10, begin painting, working from the inside to outside. The darkest parts first, the deepest parts first. Then, after the base colors are dry, apply a brown or a black wash. That will be an ink wash or your own wash that you make with very watered down paint. It's better to use a good quality wash or ink. That's this stuff. Where is it? So, I don't know if you guys have ever seen these, but this is a company, Games Workshop, Citadel. They sell them in gaming stores. These are a little pricey, but they really are worth picking up one or two, like a light brown and a black maybe. And after your base coat is done and you put all the colors on, you use this wash and it makes everything settle in. Mark, what's up, bud? So everything settles in and it blends everything nicely. But then some people just say, oh, that's beautiful, I'm going to keep it just like that. It dulls things down as well. So after you do that, the next one is, after the wash is dry, apply the base color again only to the higher surfaces. So you go back with the colors that they originally were, that have been dulled down now, and you apply a little bit more just on the edges to brighten up those colors. So those are really good steps to make something look great. After the second base colors dry or applied, you can lighten base colors to the edges. Check that you're satisfied with the colors and their dark to light effects. Flock the base with desired covering and clear coat the entire piece with dull coat spray testers. If you want it to have a little more of a shiny finish, you can get a matte clear finish. You can get those less expensive than the dull coat. Dull coat by Testers is a pricey little can of clear coat, but it really makes your miniatures look real. You might want to, but you want to, instead of wasting it, you want to have several or more miniatures out when you spray them, because that way you don't waste, you get more coverage. Now the flocking, what is flocking? Flocking is the thick ground cover that goes on the base to make it look realistic. One of the tricks I've used is dry tea leaves from tea bags. If you don't drink tea, find a friend, especially those herbal teas that have little chunks of leaves and sticks and stuff. Let the tea bag dry out really, really well. Break it open and put it into a container. Chinese soup. Keep those containers. They hold everything. They hold my water. I keep it in here. The top becomes a palette, so I can mix instead of using the little palette dimple things that I gave you. You can use them for that. They're really great to blend and mix colors, and they clean up really well. Tea leaves are really great to use. I have a container at home that that I just add a bunch of different things. You can buy pre-made different types of make-believe grass and stuff, but I always find the best is to make your own. Just add little bits of sand or dirt, little pebbles, rocks, and look for colors. I'm in a parking lot the other day, and I looked down, and they had covered the whole thing with a gray gravel. So I went to the edge where the gravel had been crushed, and it was like this fine gray powder. I was like, this is awesome. I scooped it up. He was looking at me like I'm collecting dirt from the parking lot, right?
What do you use this for? Sorry.
Flocking, which means I put a little super glue on the base,
Gotcha.
and then spread it out with a toothpick or something, making sure I don't go up onto the shoes and the legs. I don't want it to touch that part. And then I dunk the whole thing in this mix, and I shake it back and forth. I tap it off a couple of times, and I laid it out. And if you go over to my booth where I have my friends selling my miniatures, you'll see they all have a nice flocking. And if the spider that's brown is still there, you'll see that gray material I got recently. It really looks cool. It just looks so real because it's real. It's not like man-made stuff. It's real rocks that's been pulverized. And so the finer you get it, the more realistic it looks for a little tiny miniature. All right, so let me see. My automatron, I don't know if you can see, but it's got a nice little orangey look, like it's not really rusted. It almost looks like a patina. I have more to do on this. I'm going to make this look nicer. Who knows, maybe I'll end up selling it next year or at Octacon. My mage, her green is starting to come out. My red dragon, the details are starting to come out. It's not a fast process. This is not speed painting. This is a different thing. You want to start off and you want to do it very methodically, going from dark to light. Now, does anybody have any questions? When you guys got your tickets, do they have two parts or they only have one?
Just the one, they put 330 in the back.
They put 330 on the back. Okay. All right, so that means I can't do the thing I was going to do with these. Yeah, but I can do something else. All right, so table, let's see, we have 10 people. This is table 1 and table 2. We'll say table 1 is over to my left, closer to the screen. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. What number? Everybody think of a number and tell me the number. Okay.
73.
41.
27.
And
37.
I was thinking of 8. You get a partially painted dragon. Finish it on your own time. I have a mage that's partly done. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. What do you got?
17.
52.
I thought 12 won, but it was 16, so 17 isn't. There you go. These little paint dimple trays, I wasn't planning on it, but you guys really are, could use, they're very handy, so you get to not only keep your miniature and your paintbrush, but you also get to keep a little dimple mix tray. They really clean up well. You can take them home after they dry, put a little soapy water and use your finger and the paint comes right out. All right? I have what time is it? Does anybody know?
4:24.
Okay, so this paint shop is over in about 5 minutes. I have at 5 o'clock I have an advanced paint shop starting. So you guys have until 5 o'clock when people start coming in, unless you've already paid for that one. You can finish as you wish, but at a few minutes before 5, if you're not doing the advanced paint shop, then I need you guys to make room for the new group coming in. So you can continue to do what you're doing. Leave the paint and the cups and everything on the table, except for the little dimple trays. I just gave away my dimple trays, didn't I? I have to find more. I hate to do this, guys. Do I have more? Oh boy, I hate to be an Indian giver. I forgot I needed them for the next shot. So just the brushes and the miniatures. Please leave the dimple trays here. I'm so sorry. I know I said I would do that, but I forgot that I have to use them. So when you are ready, go ahead and grab your mini, your paintbrush, and your instruction cheat sheet, and leave everything else. Done.